The fourth edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now. This is Carolina basketball.
Black holding high, goes to Daugherty. Daugherty in the double team, gives it back to Black with 20 seconds left to play. Goes back to Michael Jordan, jumper from out on the left, good! Michigan out of timeout. And Weber, front court, Carolina thought he'd travel with it. Weber, front court, Carolina with foul. He takes a timeout, they're out of timeout. Technical foul on Michigan.
Now gets it away to Donald Williams. Down the side to Stackhouse. Stackhouse streaking in on Park. Reverse dunk is good, and he gets fouled by Park. Oh, my goodness, what a dunk. Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out to hit. Long outside shot. Short rebounded. Hey, it's over. Carolina has won the national championship. Belton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. 89-72. And how about them Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time.
From HeelToughBlog.com, this is the Four Corners podcast, featuring your host, Josh Marlowe. I am now joined by longtime Carolina basketball writer Art Chansky. Art, good morning, man. How's it going?
Good, Josh. How are you down there? Everything good?
Yeah, everything's going good, man. I do like to ask all my guests, especially ones I haven't had on in a long time. You know, the last year and a half or so has been really crazy with COVID. So how have you handled COVID, and hope everyone's been safe down your way?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think I've been fortunate. I got my 2 vaccines, and I've been careful in terms of how to live my life, trying to not stay inside all the time or stay home all the time. So fortunately, I have my own business, and it requires me to go to a radio station and do some other things. So I've been engaging and traveling a little bit, but very carefully. And so I hope we're on the other side of it now. How about you? Your people do okay?
Yeah, man. We've been staying safe as best we can, but also still trying to live life a little bit. Let's dive right in and let's talk about the Tar Heels. The cliche thing to ask you is, what was your reaction or your thought? But I want to know, what was your reaction or your thought when you first heard the news that Roy Williams was in fact retiring?
Well, it was a shock. I mean, anytime a coach of Roy Williams' stature and his longevity, I went through the same thing with Dean Smith, and it's happening at some point, but it's a little bit shocking. I was not really surprised because I felt that Roy was coming to the end of his career, but I was more sad I was happy for him because if it was something that he felt he wanted to do at this point in his life, then it was good for him. But I'm sad for UNC basketball, and I am sad for Roy in the sense that he didn't go out the way he wanted to in terms of his last few seasons.
You know, like you said, that you had a pretty close seat when Dean Smith was going through his retirement. Did you get the sense during this season that this could have been his last season coaching the Tar Heels?
I didn't. I really thought, because it was such a weird season, I really thought that he'd one more year where he could coach, where he could walk through the tunnel with fans in the stands, and all the COVID adjustments gone. So I was kind of hoping that he would do it one more year. But honestly, I thought the signals were there. I think Roy wants to have some active years of his life with his family, his grandchildren, his great, obviously, love for golf. And he's won 903 games, and he was the fastest to 900, so has won a lot of championships. And if you know where Roy came from, his story is as incredible as anybody in the profession. So,
right.
I wish that he had stayed one more year, but you could see the problems that were occurring with the team that he felt that he couldn't be effectively solved anymore. And I'm not sure whether the games of the kids have just changed a lot, or whether Roy, in fact, wasn't as effective as he was in the past. But it didn't matter. The bottom line came down to that he wanted to turn it over, the program, to somebody else, and it was time for someone else to take over. And that's what Dean said in 1997. And that was, I'll remember that day forever, because he was the only basketball coach that I knew from UNC all those years, and when he left, it was kind of shocking. But Roy, Carolina was very fortunate to have two Hall of Fame coaches in my lifetime and in most people's lifetimes. So what more can you ask for? I'm a big New England Patriots fan because I grew up in New England, and people talk about how bad the Patriots were last year, and I say, yeah, they were pretty bad, but boy, I had a great 20 years before that.
Yeah, right.
So,
as I mentioned, you're a Carolina basketball historian, so you've been around for a lot of the big moments. One of the big moments was when Roy Williams came back in 2003 after saying no in 2000. What do you remember about the days leading up of the announcement of him being hired as the new head basketball coach at North Carolina?
I was hoping, and I emphasize hoping, I was hoping that he would take the job, because in 2000, when he decided to stay at Kansas, I thought he would stay at Kansas forever. Dean Smith was a Kansan who came to North Carolina and decided to stay at North Carolina forever. And I thought Roy felt that he could be a North Carolinian who would stay at Kansas, and he was a tremendous success in Kansas and extremely popular, one of the most, if not the most recognizable figure in the state of Kansas during those times. But things changed here and at KU between 2000 and 2003, and so he ended up open to it. And then I think the big thing was he couldn't say no to Dean Smith twice.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Smith said, we want you to come back in 2000, and in 2003 he said, we need you to come back. And there's a lot of detail about it, about how Bill Guthridge was the interim coach and how Roy really wanted Bill Guthridge to either stay forever or not stay as long as he did, because Roy got into a situation where he missed the window to coach his son Scott for a season at Carolina, who was a walk-on. He also had promised Kirk Heinrich, Drew Gooden, and Nick Collison that he would stay and coach them for as long as they were at Kansas. So there were good reasons why he stayed in 2000. So what happened at Kansas and at Carolina, of course, with Matt Doherty not being successful, and then Kansas, in my estimation, Kansas played the biggest part in it, because once Roy said that he was staying at Kansas in 2000, he had that famous quote where he said, next time I have a press conference like this, I'll either be dying or retiring. Yeah. And so the Kansas people said, well, we got him forever. And they did some really foolish things. The first thing they did, Kansas was great in basketball at that time, but they weren't really good in the rest of their athletic department. So the first thing Kansas did was find Bob Frederick, who was his good friend, and more importantly than that, the man who gave Roy a job in 1988 when nobody knew who he was. I mean, he was like the fifth person they asked to take that job. They were coming off a national championship with Larry Brown, but they were also heading for an NCAA probation. And Dean Smith got him that job for sure. And so Bob Frederick took the chance. So then they fired Bob Frederick, which is a tremendous insult to Roy. And his good buddy was Terry Allen, the football coach. And Roy wasn't against coaches getting fired if they deserved to get fired, but they fired Terry Allen in the middle of the season, which was really embarrassing. to him, and then they named this athletic director named Al Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't really consult Roy about that, and Al Bowl came in and started doing some things that directly affected the basketball program. So within 3 years, actually more faster than that, within 2 years, the job that Roy wanted to keep forever in Kansas wasn't the same job. And so when rumors started here that Matt Doherty wasn't going to make it, I think he became open to coming back. But again, I was hoping that, because it was a tough decision to leave his players back then, even though he hadn't committed. Those Heinrich, Gooden, and Carlson were done, and he hadn't really committed to anybody else to stay as long. But it was still, Roy loves his players, and it was hard for him to leave. And he agonized over it for about a week the first time, and it looked like he was doing it again in 2003. But he finally made the decision. And Josh, Carolina has had ups and downs in athletics over the last 20 years. But think about how fortunate they are that Roy Williams came back in 2003 when he didn't have to. And then think of how fortunate they were that Mac Brown took the job in football in 2019. You can ask, where would those two programs be if Roy Williams didn't come back in 2003 and Mac Brown wasn't the guy that they hired to follow Larry Fedora? And the answers would be probably long, even in basketball, which was a blue blood program for years, long. Every big time program after John Wooden retired, after Adolph Rupp's regime in Kentucky and so forth, they had these long droughts, maybe as long as 10 years before they got back into national prominence. Right. And that probably would have happened with Carolina in basketball. And certainly they were headed that way in football until Mac Brown came back and has done an amazing job rebuilding what he had done the first time.
You mentioned that he won 903 games, the fastest to ever win 900 at the college level. He's won 3 national championships, 5 Final Fours with Carolina, won the ACC regular season 9 times, and won the ACC tournament 3 times. What will Roy Williams' legacy be at North Carolina and then the college game overall?
Well, you'll have to say he's definitely one of the dozen or so greatest coaches of all time, and it just depends on the metrics you use to judge that. But like, we said, fastest to 900, one of only a few coaches to win more than 2 NCAA championships, known as a tremendous recruiter, won 400-plus games at 2 Blue Bloods, a popular, respected guy, really, really well-liked. And so I think he'll be remembered. And then in the micro of it, people will look at his record since he's been back at Carolina since 2003 or 4. He has won. He's won 3 national championships compared to Duke's 2. Right? He has consistently beaten Duke for the regular season championship. He's really, even overall, Krzyzewski still has a better record. But since in the 18 years, and not even in the 18, because as we discussed, the last few haven't been that well. But overall, he has won the Duke-Carolina rivalry in terms of what both programs have accomplished. And I think around here, people who kind of zero in on that particular aspect will see that he did very well to hold his own against Duke. When Duke, there was a period of time, in the 90s and the early 2000s when Duke was dominating Carolina, winning something like 15 out of 17 games. And we'll talk about it. You asked me a question about the rivalry. We can talk about that later on. But that's the only thing that really could destroy a rivalry like Duke-Carolina. If one side starts to dominate so much that the team that's dominating finds other rivals. Like, over the years, remember when the Duke-Maryland rivalry got to be very hot. And then the Carolina-Virginia rivalry got very hot when Duke was down and Ralph Sampson was in Virginia. So the only thing that can really destroy a rivalry like Duke-Carolina is if it's a long period of time when both teams aren't very good. one of the teams aren't very good, and the rivalry is not